All right, well, welcome everyone. Super good to see lots of familiar faces. I actually see a few people who have been with us years prior, so that's super fun. Welcome to the E-Track. This is session 6, I think, for the fall series, and we've got a great lineup of speakers for you tonight. And I've got this quick thought for the day. So I think I had that on when everybody was joining, which is fun. And I just have a few brief things before we get going. So the San Diego Angel Conference is part of the Free Enterprise Institute at USD, which is housed at the University of San Diego. And so we're excited to be part of that group. And we do a few other things. So we have student-facing programs through the Catalyzer, and we have community-facing programs through the Brink SBDC, which is an innovation accelerator here in San Diego. The applications are open. I haven't seen a completed application come through yet, which isn't a total surprise. We don't expect to see those just yet, but usually have one or two. The application fee is $149, and for that you get a ticket to the main conference, in addition to the processing of your application and having it reviewed by the angels that invest with us. So if you haven't found the place to get started, the place to get started is on the website. So thesdangels.com/apply, or you can just go to thesdangels.com and click the apply tab, which is in sort of in the middle of the right. So I've got a screenshot here, and then if you just go partway down the page, there's that apply button, and that is the good place to get you started. If anybody's having any trouble with that, please let me know in the chat or send me an email. We want to make sure that that's working for everybody. We don't want anybody to get caught in that system. We couldn't do this if it weren't for sponsors, so we're very excited to have Nextwork as the title sponsor for this year. So if you have needs to outsource any kind of software development, Nextwork is a place to look for custom solutions and lots of off-the-shelf things that they can take and customize your off-the-shelf software as well. And this program is also brought to you by a ton of partners. So we've got a really fantastic group of partners here in San Diego. These are all the organizations that are providing services to startups like yours. So if you need help connecting with any of these organizations, please let me know. Or if you came to us from one of these organizations, please tell them thanks on our behalf. It's super great to have this many fantastic partners to work with in a place where we're doing so much cool stuff with the startup scene. The quick of it is that we are in the middle of the Angel Conference, E-Track. We're about halfway done now, and the deadline to apply is December the 15th, which then kicks off the investor stage, which starts the first week of January. And that date, January 5th, that's the day that we give access to the investors. So all the applications become available, and they can really start to dig in and look at your companies and start to get to know you. And then they'll spend 3 months choosing finalists and a winner for San Diego Angel Conference 4, which is still tentatively set for March 26th. And we have a great group of people that help us manage everything. So this is our fund management team. We've got Brian on the line, and also, I'm not sure if Sumner's here tonight, and then a fantastic fund management team that includes also on the call tonight, Tammy Stevenson, Benton Moore, who's also fund manager from Fund 2, and I can't see if we've got any others from fund management team, but feel free to jump in here if you have anything you'd like to share. So Brian, I'll hand it over to you if you have anything you'd like to share today.
Probably nothing out of the ordinary. It's exciting to see so many faces back again and a handful of new ones in there. We really do have a fantastic fund management team. Misty and Chris do most of the heavy lifting, to be perfectly honest with you. And then we get the fun part of kind of interacting with all of you. And once we get into the I-Track, evaluating everything that you submit. So as Misty said, it's a little bit early, but feel free to put your application in. Realize that it's not a static thing. You can get that application in now, and you can continue to update the information in Gust all the way through the deadline and beyond. Those of you who move through the iTrack, kind of the investment side of things, we actually expect that Gust profile to be updated really every week as your startup changes. Things move very quickly, as you know. So glad to see everybody. Glad to have David here. Misty, thanks.
Any of our other fund managers want to jump in here? Anything to share? Okay. So with that, I want to talk about our main speaker tonight. So Dave, if you post this on Twitter, it means I have permission to use it.
That's correct. That is correct.
This is Dave Darmstandler. He's the CEO and co-founder of DataPath. He and I have worked together for quite a while. I think we met back in maybe 2012 or so. And every time I talk with Dave, I learn things about finance that I didn't know before. So very excited to have him here with us tonight. And I know that he will be, engaging, inspiring, entertaining. Anything else, Dave, that I should set the standards any higher?
I would just keep your expectations low, just like Thanksgiving dinners with your family or Christmases. No, I just excited to be here, excited to kind of share, what I do know and hopefully answer some questions and help people along. So do I have the mic now or do I?
It's all yours, Dave.
Okay, let me, I am in technology. Let me prove it by being able to share my my presentation here. Let's see if it'll work. So.
As David pulls that up, I'll just point out this is one of the silver linings of COVID because David, you're in Park City, aren't you?
I am.
So it would have been a bit of a trip for him to join us in San Diego, but through the wonder of technology, which I think he's got working now, there we go. We've got Dave.
Yeah, the famous Zoom line. Everybody see it. So yeah, show me the money. Yeah, tonight, just really want to kind of talk through kind of the practical guide around funding for your business and your startup. So we'll have some polls, just kind of figure out who I am talking to, so kind of what phase you're at in the journey. And just full disclosure, you may hear children in the background. So I am working from home this evening. Got 4 kids, which I'll get to here in a minute. But so give me 1 second here. So yeah, as Misty said, been the CEO and co-founder at DataPath. DataPath is headquartered in Modesto. We have 2 other offices, one in Fresno, one in Orange County. And been on the Inc. fastest growing list 8 times, and we've completed 2 acquisitions in the last 3 years. I am kind of currently an Inc. magazine contributor. I'm supposed to be contributing a lot more, but every month or so you'll see an article from me, usually coming out in Inc. I am an active angel investor, so been doing that for about a decade, which is how I met Misty in the first place. So we've been involved in a lot of different mentoring programs at the UCs, incubators, kind of up and down the state, and different states. So we, it's been a fun ride. Prior to DataPath, I did have a couple other startups, which I full disclosure, I put my pants on just like everybody else does, or I guess sweatpants now with Zoom. So I grew up pretty poor, so I kind of had to bootstrap myself, and I've always kind of worked that way. And the same has been for business. So it's the startups I had previously, we had one where we raised over $1 million in seed capital, and everybody lost everything. So kind of seen a little bit of everything along the road, and I've learned some lessons from it for sure. And as Missy mentioned, personally, I am based in Park City, Utah now, and married with 4 kids. I've got 3 boys and a little girl. I love to ski, although I did break my leg this last year skiing. And I do love to mountain bike, drink whiskey, and I thought for a period I was addicted to hot tubbing, but I've since been relieved of that. But yeah, we'll be talking about today is just kind of my story of fundraising And then just kind of going into to the different options for fundraising. So, kind of what does it look like when you're early stage? What's out there? What resources? Kind of what should you be looking at? And then as you kind of mature, kind of, what can you get from banking, and what does that look like? And what are banks looking for? So I call that the good, bad, and the ugly, because I've kind of been through it all with banks, had some experiences there. And then, fundraising for those that are, scaling and need to grow quickly just because, they have something of, high value. So they may or may not have high cash flow. So just kind of talking through the options for those companies as well. So, Chris, if you don't mind, that first poll, is it possible to throw that up?
Yep, put it up now.
All right, yeah, if you guys don't mind just filling this out, it would really help me to kind of know where you're at and who I'm talking to. Well, Chris, I know how this works. Can everybody see these, or?
Yeah, everyone should be seeing the results and sharing them now.
Great. All right, so that's super helpful. Thank you guys for filling that out. As you can kind of see, I just kind of spread it across, idea stage. So you're just kind of in that early stage of just putting stuff on a napkin, trying to figure out how you're going to get from, a concept to, actually getting a startup off the ground. Startup world's obviously, familiar with kind of all these stages. I threw, the starting to adult or adulting as a company. That's kind of, the way I look at it is that you're making money. Sometimes you get some cash flow. So you're kind of in that, you can be in a tough spot with banks. So, there's other options to look at, and then obviously the mature side. So, we'll be talking through all these things. So thank you guys for filling it out. So this early stage, yeah, so as you kind of see these logos off the side, I've got, Y Combinator, Angel List, Startup Engine. There's no need for me to kind of really talk through in detail what these organizations do. You guys are probably familiar with a lot of them. Y Combinator is an example, obviously a great accelerator, very well respected. A lot of people use, the safes and some of the documents they've developed for the early stage. But first and foremost, just kind of want to talk through, I don't know if you mind, Chris, I got one more survey. I was going to throw up that second one, the early stage one, and I'll be talking as you guys can fill this out. But obviously, as an early stage company, some of the most common way that people are raising money is obviously through friends and family first, right? So there's a lot of loose ways this can happen. I've seen it go well and not go so well, but the most common is to obviously do a small raise of 50 or 100, or maybe even a couple $100,000, depending on who you know in your circle. And I appreciate that you guys have gotten that answer dead on right. So telling the why and selling the story, I'm gonna, after this slide, I'm gonna go through kind of a recent startup I was working with. But as a startup, which a lot of you guys are in that stage, the why and selling the story is so critical. And it's critical for a couple of reasons. One, you want to kind of tug at the hearts of investors. But more importantly than that, you want to have people involved for the right reasons, right? If they're just involved to make money or make some giant return, when your business is, struggling, or you're trying to, redevelop yourself as a startup, or maybe what you tried initially, you've got to shift to something new. You get this pressure from investors to chase shiny things or do things just to make money that don't align necessarily with the vision of the founding team, right? So that's kind of a core. Also, you want to take money from people that you want to spend time with, right? So that would be I call it the no douchebag policy, but I mean, people that you'd want to have a beer with, somebody that you'd want to spend time with, because you're going to be tied to these people for some time. So, selling your story and selling you as an individual and as a founder is so critical, just to make sure that you've got chemistry and you match with these investors, because there's plenty of money out there. You just want to find the right money. And obviously you guys have probably already covered stuff like smart money and people that can bring in talents and things beyond just like, a check. Those things are critical, whether they have like, legal experience or experience scaling a business of their own, or maybe they have some kind of finance background. Those things are all super helpful. So obviously I've kind of talked through a little bit of just the seed round aspect. I'll kind of go into more detail just in this example coming up, but I've also got Start Engine on there just because you guys are probably familiar with crowd, sourcing. We'll kind of get that, towards the end here. I'll talk a little bit more just what's available there. But that's another option, just as you scale, your startup, or if you have something that you feel has a great story. Oftentimes that's a great way. And something Missy and I were talking about before this started was rolling funds. So for instance, being in Park City, there's quite a few previous founders of companies, so they've had some success, they've sold a large business, and that's generally how they start these rolling funds. So they become the manager, they decide they're going to start their own what's called a rolling fund, which means that investors are subscribing to a continual investment for them to go and invest in startups. And when they invest in startups, they're extremely active. So they're heavily involved in operational or day-to-day or solving problems with the startup. So it can be a really great relationship. I'm sure it can be a really bad one, but it's another option for kind of how you can find money, right? So grants is another one. So I was just working with a startup yesterday that has a very unique, clothing material they're using that's, very eco-friendly. And, I think it's honestly just a great product. And they were able to kind of with their story, obtain some funds through grants. So there's definitely those options out there. And obviously some of the other ones you guys know are, similar to kind of what you're here tonight for, but, accelerators and even VCs. So, the example I'm gonna give next, actually had quite a few VCs actually participate in their first round at a very small level, maybe 20 or 25 grand a piece. And they do that just to kind of keep tabs on the startup and, because they really like their founder, they like the concept. So it's kind of their way of just putting a little hook in to kind of keep their ear to the ground as to what's happening with that startup, so that, if they do get to a stage where, VC makes sense down the road, they're already connected and have a relationship with the founder, right? So, and by the way, at any point, if you have a question, I know we'll have a Q&A, but if you've got something that's simple, feel free to throw it in the message there. So moving on, let me just talk through this kind of example. So this company is called GiveGo, and I originally met the founder Willie at the Park City Angels. So I was at one of the meetings, and he gave a presentation. Had a great story, around his family, kind of why he started the company in the first place. So he had a really strong why for, and just, a high level of passion, right? It was just kind of just coming off him as he was giving his presentation. And I participated in the due diligence and actually became an investor in this one a few weeks ago. And so we spent about 3 weeks in due diligence. And this is kind of the other side to the seed round that's really important when you're working with a great group of investors, particularly early stages. Due diligence is not just for them; it's also for you as the founder. So Willie came away with a lot of great, not necessarily even advice, but just insight as to kind of the direction he was going. It kind of helped him, so it forced him to kind of rethink even the things that he felt like he had a really good grasp on. So you can kind of see here, these are just some of the examples from the due diligence in the deck, but you can kind of just see, how simplistic, the financial numbers are. They're not, I think that's something that startups get caught up in. They feel like they need some massive projections. Real early stage investors know that the finances, the projections they're given are probably not going to be accurate. but there does need to be some thought put behind them, but they don't need to be extremely advanced. I think that's something that can hold up. I've seen it hold up a lot of founders that maybe don't have a strength in finance as an example, and that's kind of where I was at about a decade ago. I just decided that I was going to learn as much as I possibly could about finance, so I started buying books and getting certifications wherever is required, just so that I felt confident when I was talking. But a lot of founders, it's just not a strong suit for them. So I think that little things like that can hold you up, and it's not necessary. It's more you lose time, and it's unfortunate when I see people spend too much time on that and they get really frustrated and simply just give up, right? Because it's too complicated. So yeah, so early stage, go ahead.
We have a few questions if
Sure.
you don't mind.
Yeah.
So first, are rolling funds typically not linked to a VC or firm?
Not that I'm aware of. And by all means, I'm not an expert. I do have a buddy that I work with down in Park City that has one. By what I've seen, I have not seen one tied to a VC. I've seen, primarily just entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs have had some level of success and have some following, I guess is the best way to put it. So they have a good brand behind them. So they, basically, because we put the rolling fund out, it's public, right? So you can read all about the founder, you can read about what they've done. And that's really kind of, they're getting money from people they do know. They're doing their own pushes to, get people to subscribe to these rolling funds. But it's two-sided, right? So they're looking for subscribers on the investment side, and they're also looking for startups to invest in. So what's great about that, Angel.co, I think is got some great insight on rolling funds and how they work, and you can obviously jump on Wikipedia or whatever. There's some great resources out there, but you'll see the rolling funds and what they're interested in, and that's really helpful. So I mean, they're willing to talk to most startups. I haven't seen them reject a conversation or something. So whether you're in the right spot or not, it's pretty cool. Like the guy I know, he's focused on ones that are really working on environmental work. He feels like that's where we're going to see change when it comes to global warming is through startups. So he's really focused on that. And so he's got this real narrow focus, and he's looking for those startups. And when people come along and say, I have something that's a fit, he's happy to take coffee or a phone call or Zoom or whatever. So hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. Next question is, what are the top 3 characteristics you look for with a vision or founder?
I mean, obviously, first and foremost is just a high level of trust, right? So when I'm in a meeting and, and I'll get to that here, why we invested in Willie, but when you don't have that high level of trust and you're in a meeting and some of that comes away, like some of the things I see founders do, and I think it's out of good intention, but it kind of deteriorates trust with investors, is like when they know everything, right? So they're not willing to kind of the way they respond to questions, or they get offended, or so I mean, those are the kinds of things that are hard to connect with somebody, because you're going, okay, well, if you know everything, I mean, this is going to be a really long road, and you really need to take kind of a more humble route and just go, yeah, I'm here to soak up like any good insight someone give me. I'm not going to necessarily, take that information and make that decision based on that, but I'm going to be open as an individual. So I've seen that a lot, where people are, especially when they're kind of, you guys are probably seen on Shark Tank and stuff too, where, someone's got what they believe to be the best idea, and it's just their baby, and nobody can say anything about the baby because it's, and so investors just kind of shut off. You'll see it in a room, you'll watch their faces change. They may even leave the meeting. I mean, it's not uncommon. I've seen that quite a bit. And the next for me would be just drive. So someone that's, gritty, someone that's knowing and been down that road, what it's like. Grit's a, definitely characteristic that you have to have. You can't give up easily. You're going to be told no. I think there was like Peloton. My wife was telling me about a Peloton podcast with that founder, and I think I can't remember the number of lunches he had, but it was over like 7 or 9 years or something. He had something like, I don't know, 500 lunches or meetings or something where he got told no. So it's, there's a incredible amount of resistance you get, especially when you're doing something innovative or new. People, fear change. So, I mean, you have to have that grit. And then lastly, I mean, obviously, you have to have a high level of competence, right? So, somebody that can actually, I think those other things are going to make you a great leader, but that level of competence is going to help you really develop, something of value, right? So I think that's a really, really important part. So hopefully that helps answer that question. So it's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Next,
go ahead.
yeah. So this is a big one. Obviously, don't need to go into too much detail on this, but what does due diligence entail?
I've seen really poor due diligence. I've seen extremely structured due diligence. Park City Angels, I feel like they do an extremely detailed job at due diligence. I mean, more so than I've ever seen anywhere else, in a non-offensive way. I've been at some of the big names, which I won't name them, but some of the big groups have participated. We've been sharing an investment or something like that, and I feel like some of the due diligence was just more insulting or just almost like tearing the entrepreneur apart. And it's, that still happens in any investment meeting. Like somebody needs to feel good about themselves, so we'll tear apart some entrepreneur. But my take on it is like, for the entrepreneur to even get to the point where they're showing a slide deck at a, angel meeting, first of all, they had to make it to the angel meeting, which is extremely difficult, right? You have to make it through the application process. So, most are weeded out. So I'm not the type to tear people apart just because I feel like, they've already had a hard road to get where they are. So like, let's help them. In the case of due diligence, with, for instance, GiveGo as an example, we looked at, there was a group that there was broken up into, so due diligence had a team of, say 10. There was groups of 2 were broken up to focus on area, right? So my job was to focus on the tech, since that's my background. And then, others were focusing on, finance. So they were looking at what's, how much money's in the bank, what's their burn rate, what's the margin they're making off of their services existing. There was another group that looked at the business model. And then there's another group that looked at the team. So they looked at the talent, they, interviewed them, and they talked to the other investors, and they talked to their advisory board as well. So, so it was pretty substantial. I think every group spent, a number of hours, probably depending on the group that was, in their section, probably 2 to maybe 6 or 8 hours. The guy that led the due diligence, there's always someone that's leading it. He must have spent 30, 40 hours in due diligence. I did a great job, phenomenal, great report. So put a report out at the end. So there was a lot of meetings with the founder to, make sure the information was accurate. Then the report was dispersed out to the entire angel group. And that's when people, raised their hand or, as far as if they were interested in investing. So, so it's really just from the Park City groups, not to say that if they were to, there's no like failure of due diligence. I mean, there definitely could be, especially if something unethical was found or something like that, but it's mainly just around, is it, here, here's the information that we extracted, and as an investor, you make your decision. But I think everybody, from my experience, there was a couple of people that bowed out, but they bowed out for other reasons, as far as investing, and the rest of them, those that I think pretty much all of them, but maybe one person involved in due diligence actually didn't invest. I mean, the entire group involved, 9 out of the 10 invested. So everybody that went through due diligence, I think it just kind of solidified what they actually felt about the founder and the company. So, and the opportunity for sure. So, and then as you can kind of see, some of their stuff is, I think that was part of the business model aspect. They went through the NPS score. They looked at what customers thought of the product. So there's a lot of that data extracted too. So, yeah.
All right, so we have a couple more questions, and we'll get going here right after this. Sorry, just
Yeah, it's
getting a bunch
okay.
coming in. So how many companies that pitch to Park City Angels get funded by them? And you can also take that in kind of more general, the experience of pitching to groups like that.
Yeah, I'm new to the Park City Angel group. I can't say for sure. I don't know, and it's grown a lot. So through the pandemic, I know a lot of people have moved to Park City in the Utah area. So there's a lot more new. There's a lot of new angel investors in the group. It seems to me so far they've got I think there was only one out of the three of this last presentation that didn't get investment. So it was, it's pretty. I think there was 4 presentations, so all of them got some form of investment. One of them I think went straight from, I think was a referral from the angel group because everybody in the room felt that they were too advanced. They were already making too much money. They should just go straight to a venture capital group. So I think one of the angels, was a VC or had a connection and just did that. But yeah, it's pretty decently high. I think some of the other angel groups are much lower. It's a problem for founders. We go and present to these groups where people don't invest in anything ever. So it's like, don't waste your time. There's a lot of time wasting groups out there for sure, but there's definitely quite a few that are extremely active where there's people that have, tens of investments, if not maybe 30. So, and this group has had a lot of exit success. So that's kept that money coming back in and going back out. So.
All right, thank you. Yeah, there are a couple more we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, that's great. Let me just,
right?
let me finish my thoughts here. So with Willie and GiveGo, great concept, obviously lots of passion, past due diligence, people felt good about it. And he was raising, friends and family round initially. This round when he came to the Park City Angels, he was looking for $500,000. He actually ended up raising 650. So he oversubscribed on the round. So, I think overall, great success for him. And what else is really cool about those that were involved was there's quite a few angels that are retired from some pretty cool positions at large companies. So they're making connections for Willie to integrate the product with some big brands. So that's the kind of stuff you're looking for when you're working with angel groups is, obviously, the caliber of investors that they're able to, first of all, they're able to invest, they make investments, that they're active. And then, that you also have some, other attributes from those investors, obviously that you enjoy, that they've got the same qualities that they're looking for in you, that they're integrous and they're trustworthy, and you enjoy just hanging out with them as human beings, doing business together. So there's no reason to help jerks make more money, right? So, but in the end, you also need some of these connections, and like I said earlier, some of these skill sets that maybe you don't have on your team yet, right? So definitely, I think really lucked out with teaming up there. So moving on to this banks, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know there was a small percentage of those that are kind of more mature companies that are on the call here tonight. That's definitely where my business is at, and as we kind of transitioned, we've kind of remained bootstrapped to keep control. DataPath doesn't have any outside investors, so we definitely had to kind of learn the hard way with banks. I had another survey around banks. I think it was poll number 3, right? Chris, that's right. So you can put that up as I'm talking if you don't mind. Thanks, man. So yeah, we have as we started to mature as a company, we were growing quickly, and we needed access to lots of capital, right? So even just to do the work that we were doing, so we had to kind of crank up to a line of credit of about $6 million. We needed other lines of credit for the acquisitions. So there was a lot of different things that we kind of, had to learn and mature as a company. It's a smart group. I actually kind of made that easy, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, there's a couple that are right here. Really, you guys nailed it. It's pretty much debt coverage ratio is their favorite, and cash flow, right? So you're talking to banks, really what they're looking at is they, banks are very different than investors, or, for instance, those, if you're getting a bond or something, the percentage that banks lose, I think it's somewhere still around, sub 5%, as far as a loss, and as low as some of the banks are, as low as 2%. So they're very risk adverse, right? So they're not going to bet on dreamers. They don't have the ability to. So they are really looking at, cash flow, right? So they want this, they want to know that you can make your payments. And so it's a game around, what banks would love. You talk to any banker, what they would love is you make all the profit and you leave all the profit in the business and you never take it out. And that's just not realistic for a lot of reasons, whether it be investment, whether it just be that you want to take some of that profit out because you've earned it. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. So I don't need to talk in great detail. You guys probably are aware of, some of the programs that are out there, for instance, like the SBA programs. Really, to sum it up, there's two programs. One that's just for real estate. So if you're going to buy an office, they'll allow you to put, as little as 10% down. Long term, I would highly suggest that if you're not owning your own business, and particularly if you're in like a service-based industry with very limited assets as an organization, I'd highly suggest some type of building or office that you could use, warehouse, whatever your business is. Offices are tough right now just because not very many people are in them, but either way, it gives you an asset, and that asset long term gives you something that you can borrow against. The other program is something that's you can get a little more creative with. So that's stuff that's going to be a little edgier. For instance, you can use it for acquisitions. If you want to take a building and rehab it, you can use the SBA product for that as well. Banks love the SBA program because it lowers their risk substantially. So that's a huge part of that. If you don't have a relationship with an SBA, banker, I would suggest you find one. I'll kind of get to that here in a minute, but other programs, there's definitely, depending on your industry. So for instance, DataPath has what's called our free flooring line of credit. That's $6 million. So that allows us to do a lot of the work that we need to do if we need to float large amounts of hardware, stuff like that. And then we have other lines of credit. For instance, we have an acquisition line of credit that allows us to go out when we identify a company we're going to buy. It allows us to use that line of credit to acquire those companies, right? So there's other products such as guidance lines, things like that we've used in the past. That's where you have a line of credit and you can roll things over to a guidance line for longer term amortization. If I'm losing any point, sorry. So this is banking is definitely it's an art form, and a science. So I mean, I how to decide on a bank. This is from experience. I've got we try to always have 3 banks that we're in a relationship with. So right now, DataPath has 3 different banks. So we always have at least one large named bank, and then we love local banks because we feel like we've had a better track record with local banks. They like what we're doing in the communities. They're accessible, but most importantly, when I say who's in the room, local banks have, generally they have what's called loan committees. So if you're trying to do, get a loan through, you're trying to borrow money, it's pretty easy for you locally to find out, who's in that room. And it's usually somebody that or someone that that knows someone in that room. So, or they're people that you can, take out and get lunch with, or have coffee, or, get on the phone pretty easily. Where, in the case of Wells Fargo, that's pretty difficult. These larger banks like Chase, stuff like that, it's difficult to know who's in that room making that call at the end of the day. We've had big banks in the middle of a loan pull it just because policy changed, not because the business couldn't pay the payments or we didn't look good. It was just simply because the policy changed, and that's not We have not had that from local banks. So I would definitely, the other things to look out for with banks is they generally have, some cap. So as a business, if you're scaling, oftentimes local banks will have a cap of 8, 10, or $12 million to a single customer. So that's something to watch out for. SBA programs, as a founder owner, you're going to be limited to $5 million, in money lent to you by the SBA program. So that's kind of a limitation as well. And so, in the end, as a mature company, when you get to this stage and you have some cash flow, this is banks are cheap money, right? Especially now. I mean, for instance, in 2019, because it was there, we used the SBA program. We acquired a 20,000 square foot building for our headquarters. We spent $2 million rehabbing it and building out a security operations center, network operations centers, all stuff for our business. The rate on that loan from the SBA was 2.59% fixed for 25 years. So that money's pretty hard to beat. As much as I love investors, I love more having control of our company in the direction, and definitely banking gives you some of that option. So even if right now, if you're talking expensive money with banks, you might be talking 5.5%, 6%, depending on your bank. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with banking, and the more you learn about it, and the more you mature. And when I say mature, it's kind of like you've got consistent cash flow, you can show it, you have a consistent leadership team, and then you have a third party, auditing you, right? So in our case, we have 2 different CPA firms, one doing obviously kind of a full audit of data path and presenting a report to the banks, and so they're seeing that every year. And then the other side, we have another type of CPA firm just looking at how we do our business and processes as a technology company, and they're certifying that we're doing it in accordance with regulations, and so we do a SOC 2 type 2 compliance report that the banks also love. So there's whatever kind of helps check those boxes and lower that risk for the banks seems to keep them excited and keep them engaged with us as a customer. And then obviously their side is just as a founder, that's probably who I'm on the phone with the most throughout the week is banks, especially when we're in the middle of transactions. We're in the middle of transactions right now. Bankers are I make them my best friends. So I'm checking in with them. I'm trying to get the inside scoop as to if we're missing something, or we're off the mark, or if we're asking for too much, if there's going to be a shortfall, and try to get all those things kind of sniffed out before they bite us as a company. So, Chris, any questions, or is that?
Yeah, I can go back to a couple from before. So one, does it help if you have access to an investment memo that's already been written by an investor?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you very well. What'd you say?
Sorry. Does it help if you have access to an investment memo that's already been written by an investor?
I don't think it hurts. I assume they're asking in regards to like seed funding. Is that probably where the question was from? But are they talking more on the banking side?
No, I'm talking about the angel investing side or seed side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, is that something an investor did for you? They wrote like a memo.
Yeah, we have like 6 of them.
Okay.
We've raised about 600,000, and various groups have written different investment memos or investment briefs, and it just seems to me as though somebody could just take what's already been done and then just decide whether or not they're going to invest, instead of stringing us along for 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever. Right?
Yeah, I know. That's the problem with investors, is that they don't, they oftentimes don't realize that the startup is in a real high need for the capital, right? And they have to be reminded, because they're generally investing because they're busy or they're vacationing a lot. They're professional vacationers. I see that a lot. So, I think out of our due diligence group, we had literally 2 people out of town every week. It was like every week's 2 people were missing, myself included at points. So, I think, and I've seen that a lot. So, we had another one that eventually went under for that reason. This last year, there was another startup we were involved in that we had a lot more money in, that, investors dragged their feet, and the company finally got like big press and had all kinds of contracts in the pipe and needed capital to keep going. And everybody had just dragged their feet. It was just, and then of course, when it went under, they were like, oh, there's still time, right? Like, no, everyone's, haven't you been reading the emails or the, opening your voicemail or, responding to text messages? So, yeah, I don't think it hurts. It's a tough one because they kind of all need to do their own due diligence. I don't think that hurts. I think you could add that into a package or a deck and then answer, kind of the most obvious questions, which is just kind of like, how are you going to make money? Where are you at now? What's your burn rate? Just some of the stuff that's probably the top of the mind for investors. End of the day, though, if they're, some of it is just the pressure of the round closing, which gets people to write checks faster, or the, just the fear of missing out, right? So I think that's a big part. That's something that was, I think, kind of some of it with GiveGo, is that there's so many people saying yes on like a string of emails that I think more people probably wrote checks faster than they probably would have, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, I don't really know how many people, I read the due diligence report. I have a strong feeling that maybe I was of the 20% that actually read the due diligence, and the rest of them were just saying thumbs up or thumbs down. That's because they're busy. They don't, or they just, it doesn't mean enough to them to read it. So, but yeah, those memos, I don't think they've hurt. I think it helps substantiate that you're legitimate and that people are happy with the money that they did put in. You go as far as having videos made. I don't know what would help you. But I think for that to work for me, it'd have to be someone I know, right? So it'd have to be somebody I respect or have been in other deals with, or love working with them. And respect that, their perspective and their insights. So, but yeah, that's it's definitely, I've seen a lot with startups. I've seen a lot of them do some pretty interesting things, and I've also seen them go in and just be looking for money from one investor, and that's the only one they want involved. And so they put, they kind of put pressure on the whole deal to get them to write a check, and sometimes it works out. So hope that helps. I don't know if that did, but. Cool.
One more question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about patents? Is it necessary to have one for investors' willingness to invest, or is a provisional patent sufficient?
I just depends on the business. I've seen tons of people get hung up on those in businesses that doesn't matter. They're already in a super competitive space. As long as they're not infringing on someone else's patent, or IP. Provisional is great. If you have that, you're way ahead of most. I've seen other startups that they've got a patent on a great product. I was involved in one 5 years ago, phenomenal product, patent on it, all done, sealed up. Horrible founder, wasn't going to make it, a block down the street, and was just going to, so that I've seen a lot of that. So I think, I haven't seen anyone get too hung up on that. If they were really interested in the company and the founder, they kind of assumed that we would figure that out along the way. And also, most of them know, if they're pretty active investors, that it's more than likely that what they're doing is going to change a lot, or maybe just a little if they're lucky. So, so in that case, you'd have to redo that work anyways. So, cool. Moving on, is there more questions, or move on to
Good to go. Thank you.
all right. I got, I think there's one more. There's one on the crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, whatever you want to call it. But if you want to throw up that last survey for me, Chris, if you don't mind. So here we go. Without Googling it, without cheating. it's kind of fun to watch. Got about half the response in there. So yeah, this is just kind of fundraising for scaling, whether you are a mature business and you are cash flowing, you're making money, or whether you have something that really needs a high injection of cash to grow. I see you guys, around the crowdsourcing. Believe it or not, drum roll, Reg A, you can actually raise $75 million. So I'll kind of go through, 100 would be great, but 75 is still a lot. So, around the kind of the fundraising for scaling, you have, obviously you see Start Engine over there again. What's great about them is they'll kind of help manage your Reg CF and Reg A. So with Reg CF, you can do up to 5 million. With Reg A, you can do up to 75 million. I'll kind of get to why that's important here in a minute, but if you have something, particularly if you're, business to consumer, but even if you're business to business, they did one, I think they raised a substantial for that. It was Nightscope company. You guys probably saw the advertisements on Instagram or something, wherever you're on. They were advertising that pretty hard on Start Engine, but they raised a substantial amount of money through this method, and there's definitely some advantages to it. It's still considered a public raise, but the average investor is putting in $800 to $1,200, and the requirements on the business are a lot lower. So you would have to be a C corp if you're not one already. You're not going to want to be an LLC because that's going to be a tax nightmare for you. But the C corp, with doing some of this, crowdsourcing, what's nice about this Start Engine, there's a few other companies that do it, but they handle all the regulatory paperwork required for you. They get everything set up. They handle all the advertising, so you can just continue to be a founder. There is some cost to it on the marketing side, stuff like that. All these firms are kind of the same. The old school way of doing this was to, hire some investor guys to go travel around the United States and raise money at, family office meetings, that kind of stuff, or just investor meetings. But there is a cost to it. I don't know what Start Engine costs. I think it's somewhere around 7% or something of the cash raised and 2% of that round in equity. So there is some cost there, but it's definitely cheaper than some other types of money. The other ways is you're maturing. This probably wouldn't be as much for like a high tech, tech business that's scaling super fast, but maybe. But family offices, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 of them throughout the United States. Some have a few $100 million they're playing with. Some have far more than that, billions of dollars. What's nice about family offices, as opposed to say like venture capital or private equity, is that if you need, say, $1 million or $5 million or something like that, they will come in at those lower levels if they really like the space that you're in. Particularly if they've kind of been looking through a company in that space, and they're looking at the founders, but they also bring a lot of smart money to the table, so they're bringing a lot of their connections. So definitely worth a conversation depending on where you're at in your maturity as a company. Those are really great for companies that kind of already have their business model figured out and have a good leadership team, and they just need some capital, but maybe they're too small for private equity or venture capital. And that kind of leads us to private equity. If you're kind of that mature business, the deal size has gone up on private equity. It's just very costly for them. It's the same cost for every deal they do. So, a lot of them are kind of in that. It's pretty hard to find any that will do, sub $5 million. Maybe $10 million. But most I've talked to over the last year or two, it's been in the neighborhood of $30 million they need to deploy in order for the deal to make sense. So you'll find smaller boutique firms that may have a different perspective. The problem with private equity is they kind of all sound the same. They generally like to tell you where Harvard's located. They're not, they're really good salespeople, right? So I cannot say that I have any friends that have taken private equity that have had a good experience all the way through. So unfortunately, I think it's just part of the game. Their money's super expensive. They like to leverage companies extremely high. leverage buyouts, those kinds of things. And they really tend to destroy the culture of the companies. There's definitely really good ones out there. There's a few that I know of that I've worked with that I like as human beings. And they have some success stories and some people that still work with them and like them. So that's a good sign. But a lot of them, it's a really tough business and they have a really short timeline. So that's the advantage of those family offices. Family offices can go 7, 10, 15 years. So a lot of them, if you talk to them or look at kind of their websites or their mission, most of them have a real long-term perspective because they're looking to get into industries for a long term. They're not looking to do something short term. Looking to really build some nice value over time. The lastly, strategic partner, right? So this one's just kind of I don't think it happens as often, but if you have a partner that maybe you're using a lot or technology you're using a lot, or maybe you're complementing a large company, they often will make investments. So, or even buy you at that point, even early stage, but not super common, but it does happen. I've kind of, been in talks with some of the startups that, I've worked with that stuff has worked out to some degree, whether just they came in and around, or maybe they made some investment, or maybe they just helped them really feed their business, a lot more sales. So a lot of that stuff can happen. It's just not as common. Venture capital, my little brother is in the space. I don't know enough about it. I haven't really been that involved in venture capital. I've talked to a number of firms. I've been engaged with them in some capacity, but again, they're kind of in the same boat where their money is expensive and they're required to make pretty high returns. So there's definitely good ones out there and not so good ones, but there's another option if you're kind of in a high scale business. So yeah, that's all. Good.
Oh, I was just gonna say we have a couple of questions, so
Great.
I'll let you wrap it up here and then give you the questions.
No, that's it. I just that's my last slide, and I've got my contact information there at the bottom. And go ahead, fire away, Chris. What do you got for questions?
Great. Well, thank you. So first question here is, what's the difference between the different crowdfunding platforms?
As far as maybe they could clarify. I don't know if they're on the line still, but
Yeah, it's me again.
Okay.
It's Karen with McKenna. So we won a pitch competition with Kevin O'Leary that was sponsored by Start Engine.
Okay.
And we got selected, we got admitted or whatever to do Start Engine. So we've pushed it off. We're going to push it off till January because I want to see what we can do with VCs. Some VCs feel very skittish about crowdfunding still. So we have a term sheet but I'm wondering which of the platforms, Republic or, Start Engine or WeFunder, or, there's a lot of them. What is really the difference between all of them? Do you know?
Nothing. Start Engine's the largest. As far as just when they say largest, they have the largest, bank of like existing investors or active, but again, active investor means that they're putting in $800 in a deal, right? So
okay,
they're not doing anything special. This is stuff coming from the SEC, right? This was opened up, I think, through Obama years ago. It's not, it's just some pretty simplistic paperwork that you have to fill out. There is some, you have to make sure you're doing it right, but there's also some great attorneys that could help you with that. So you can technically raise the money yourself and that would cost you nothing, or you could hire someone just to actively raise money. It is still considered a public raise. So, all of it, even though, whatever they want to call it, crowdfunding, ever, it's still technically a public raise. So there are, SEC regulations around it. The upside, as opposed to like VC or private equity, write you a check. They're going to create a board if you don't have one, and they're going to stick a couple of their people on there, and they may or may not be people you like or work well with. They'll probably help you drive to success. That's part of it as a partner they have. But what's nice about that, Reg CF or Reg A, so Reg CF, you could you can do both simultaneously. So you could be doing Reg CF and raising 5 million, and you could do Reg A at the same time because it takes longer. And say you want to raise 50 million. The nice part is that two things, you're determining your own valuation. So you have control over that, where with private equity or venture capital, you may be able to negotiate, but they're going to determine your value because they're the one writing the check, where you're going to determine that with the CF and the A, and you're going to do that on a post-money valuation, right? So it's going to get checked, right? So I mean, if it's way out of bounds, but it's, I mean, you could probably get the higher end of the market. So you're going to give away less equity and ultimately a lot less control. I don't know with the Reg A, but with the Reg CF, you have to file that Form C, I believe it is, but you only have to do it for 3 years. And then after that, you can opt out and decide you don't want to submit that form anymore. So there's things like that that I think are helpful. You know, what that does to you on later rounds, I don't know, but you have the money you need to scale. Like, do you care? Because you're probably at that point, if you have 50 million, you're going to have a decent amount of runway, and you could, you could really take care of those investors if a venture capital firm at that point wants to come in. So you could really get them a nice return, nice thank you, which you obviously would love to do. But it just gives you more control ultimately. So I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, David, that's a really good point, where you can actually set your valuation post money. I actually hadn't thought of that, and that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and it's going to be, Start Engine will be expensive. I think they charge a minimum of 10 grand a month just for the advertising, and then they're going to charge you 7% on the money, 2% on the equity. You know, you've obviously, so if you slice out 10% of your company, they're going to take 2% of that raise. They will lower that if like you identify your investors are coming in. So if you like have a group of investors are coming in, I think they'll lower their fee to 1% or something. So it's not horrible. So the upside is you're kind of hands off and you go, hey, you guys take care of this, you do it. And money supposedly just comes in. But I have a hard time believing that because there's a lot of companies on there that haven't at their full raise. So, and the nice thing about that is you can just return all the money to everybody. So if you decide that you don't need to use it, or you don't meet your $5 million, or you could also say, we're going to go for 5 million, but we get 2, you could just stop it and just go forward with what you got. So anyways, I'm definitely not like an expert on that side. But what is nice about, like, say, Start Engine and some of these other ones, they'll let you talk to their attorneys. They'll let you talk to their, like, you can just milk them for information. And just for free. So, that's the beauty of it. I wouldn't, I'm not saying I'm advising that, but I mean, if that's an option, and then if you choose to go with them, cool. But otherwise you walked away with some good information, for your time spent. So cool.
Next question is, what is a good method or place to find family offices? Benton shared familyofficenetworks.com and also recommend going to a yacht club.
Yacht clubs for sure. It's interesting. They're pretty accessible. I'd say more so than, say, private equity or venture capital for sure. They've got guys that are out there just kind of trying to find deals or find spaces that they want to be in. So, I would just say Googling them, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of them in some of the big hotel chains. Their families have family offices, obviously Bill Melinda Gates and stuff like that, but those are, I would say, quite a bit more difficult to get into. But there are definitely, like I said, I think there's like something like 3,000 of them that are doing somewhere between 250 and $750 million or something like that. It's kind of their asset base. So they're not afraid to write those little bit smaller checks. Again, with like inflation and just kind of how it's changed over the last 5 years, and some of those numbers might have gone up a little bit, but we're definitely like looking for really interesting spaces that, you know, can grow over time. And that long, if you're looking for that long-term approach, they can be good. Definitely, I know people have had more success with those. But what's interesting is it's kind of your stepping stone to private equity. They're going to probably either sell the business at some point with you, or they're going to want to do a private equity play to get out of it, or one of the cases. So.
I have a question. How do you know how much you need if you don't know all the things you will run into?
Wow. Well, I would say, like, you know, start on a piece of paper and just start to think forward as to the positions. So when I was involved in years ago, they did a really good job, a really simplistic set of projections. But they just took like the next 3 years and they just put in the, you know, professional services they thought they would need as far as outsourcing, just kind of really basic, just kind of, you know, costs that they were going to have to get up and going. And then just showed as they believed revenue is going to be coming in. I would say if you have no clue, connect with a seasoned entrepreneur and they'll help you from their painful past, determine what stuff you're missing on your projection sheet or just napkin or whatever you have. You know, because there's just probably some real basic stuff that you're probably going to need, whether it be attorney work or, you know, whatever the case is that you just don't have on that list. So on the revenue side, I don't know how much they'd be able to help you unless, you know, you have a rough idea as to kind of level of scale, but, you know, they're going to have a good idea as, you know, he or she will have a good idea as to what, you know, how much a salesperson costs, right? Outside salesperson, how much a, you know, an accounting person costs, especially if you're you can deal with somebody locally. That's probably a good place to start so that, you know, you can kind of at least have a good idea as to what your burn rate will be for the next, you know, 36 months. So that's, you know, and that's something that always concerns investors because they just don't want to write you a check and have you run out of money, which is, you know, one of the biggest reasons that startups can go under is just underestimating the amount of cash they're going to put out. So.
Someone asked, a couple of competitors in their field were acquired for $5 million. Would an angel or VC be interested in a business in the field given the historical buyout prices?
Yeah, you know, it depends on the valuation. You know, if you're valuing yourself at 5 million already, that's going to be hard because the investor more than likely is not going to even get their basis back. So, you know, if you at that point, I'd probably just find a single investor that is willing to kind of, you know, take a larger percentage of ownership and cash flow the business with you, get it to a point of sale. So that's, you know, definitely an option there. Or, you know, the other option would be to maybe buy those other competitors and glue them all together, make them a larger company. And there's, you know, different stuff you could do there, but that would be a more seasoned entrepreneur investor working with you to, you know, kind of figure that out. But yeah, it's going to be hard. I mean, you got to remember if they're going to put in the money and more importantly, the time, it kind of has to be worth, you know, the effort and squeeze for them, I guess, as far as just financially, they want some kind of return. The average return from investors is still float, you know, angel investors, if it actually goes through, is somewhere around 50% a year is kind of what they're averaging on a return. So it's somewhere between 0 and 55% a year if they have some success. So yeah, I think that one's a hard one if you're in a space that just isn't getting the value, right? So especially in the market as hard as it is right now as far as valuations. So.
Follow-up question, that 55% of what they didn't understand.
that's the return. So as far as their rate of return on their money that they put in. There's always a group out there doing research where you can find kind of current ones, but then a lot of the individual angel groups will actually publish kind of what their average return is. That's always a tough one for me. It's kind of like when people love to brag about when they go to play, they go to casinos and win money, but they never tell you about the times they went that they lost everything. So, I don't know if that's, I'm more than happy to talk about the times I lost money. Because I always learned something. It was another painful graduate degree or something I received in the process. But you always, it wises you up a little bit for the next time, or you gain something out of it. Even the ones that I've gone under, I gained, really valuable relationships with people, or friends, or whatever the case is. So, and I've never written a check expecting it to come back. It probably sounds horrible, but it's better for me mentally to know that it's kind of gone and not coming back. And if one day it comes back, it's like, sweet, it's awesome. It came back home. So yeah, it's, that's just rate of return, but it helps. Go ahead, Chris, anything else?
So they wanted to confirm that if they put in $1 million and they expect 1.5 in return.
No, that's the annual return. So if you're not going to get your money back as an angel investor in a year. I haven't really seen that. Maybe I'm sure it does happen, but no, that's the annualized return. And that's what you're hoping for too, as a founder. So it's like if they, if people are putting up, $1 million, you're hoping you can turn that into 5 million for them, right? Or 10 million. That's because that means you've come away with a much larger chunk of money as the founder. So again, it depends on the business you're in, how desirable you are for acquisition. Or maybe you just continue to grow as a company and you're a unicorn because you're cash flowing and you're growing at the same time. And there's a lot of different things, different ways that startups can go, and it works out for everybody. And then there's the other way where they fail, where it works out for nobody. So, but yeah, that's the annualized return. So that makes sense.
All right, Missy, I don't know if you want to go out into breakout rooms, open it up to people just asking questions, like turning their mic on, asking questions, or what you want to do.
I think if there's any other just open Q&A, we can go to that. I did tell David we'd get him off the call. To be fair, he's got 4 little kids and a wife who had surgery today. So the fact that we haven't had like a little entourage of people show up and to help, it's pretty amazing. So
it's incredible what duct tape does, though. If you duct tape just right.
I just knew that was coming. You hadn't said anything super flavorful like that yet.
Give it time.
We can stay here for a few more questions. If we're going to do breakouts, we'll probably go immediately to breakouts, and we'll just have like the logistics room and the investors room. If you want to jump over there, unless Dave, unless you want to stay on for a few more.
I can stay on for a few more, and then also, I put my information in there too. So I'm pretty responsive, depending on my schedule. So if people have follow-up stuff or just have some general questions, I'm more than happy to help. Yeah, happy to stay on for a few more questions if anyone has any.
So please feel free to turn your video on and your mics on and ask away.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm in CEO of a company that's very much in the startup phase, and I'm just wondering, I didn't think you mentioned it, but what if you looked at the idea of a 2-year convertible note that provided a significant discount to the next round, and had all the other protections in it, paid interest, had a minimum check size, and had a goal of something like $1 million?
Yeah, so I didn't really go into that just because there's a lot of ways to slice it. I've seen great ways and horrible ways that say, let's just say $1 million is raised. So there's a lot of different ways to raise that. The safe, or like you're saying, it's convertible is the most common. I've also, some other ways I've seen it is, early stage, they're a pass-through entity. So they're, the early stage investors, I was involved in one a couple years ago that there was a $2.5 million raise in the early stage, and it was a pass-through. And the reason it was a pass-through is that everyone knew there was gonna be massive losses. So those losses were a tax benefit to all the investors. It was passed through the investors. I don't personally understand the interest aspect because in my mind, if the startup goes away, they're not going to be paying me anything, let alone interest, because they're gone. So it's kind of it reminds me of what a lot of private equity groups do, where they have an interest on their money as well. It's just kind of weird. I think it's I guess I'd ask you, Joe, like, why would you, what would be the purpose?
Well, I think it would provide us, early cash, and we wouldn't face the dilution issues this early on, and we would have a much more solid market valuation, which right now is really based on 3 patents licensed from the Supercomputer Center.
Yeah, I mean, the struggle with it is that, if I'm investor A, right? I don't know if you have other investors already, but let's just say I'm the first investor. I'm expecting, because I'm taking the most risk, to get the most reward, right? So I expect to probably be in a position where I'm getting more equity. More than likely, you're going to lean on that investor pretty heavy for help as well, since they're kind of your first one, or maybe your first couple. And then from there, once you have those investors in place, you've got some traction, then you can boost your valuation. But again, you have to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the investor, right? So, would you write that check? And like, what would you want in return? And what I find most of the time with startups is that the very first investor is going to help shape the whole deal, right? So they've taken the most risk. They've often put the most amount of money in up front. And then they're kind of helping the founder really shape, like basically how the structure of the deal is, and even the valuation, right? So they may be getting kind of a sweetheart deal where they end up with 5% or whatever the case is of the company, but that's just because maybe even 10%, they took the biggest leap. I mean, I had one a few years ago where I had 33% of the company, but I wrote the biggest check, and I wrote it first when it was the scariest time. And the founder was like, that hurts, but guess what? Every day I worked with that founder, every single day. When he cried, when things were working, when he was celebrating, when he needed help, when he needed a connection. So those kinds of things, to me, if you're putting in that kind of time, I mean, I'm not getting a salary, right? I'm an investor, so I'm putting money out. So I mean, it was kind of like I wrote the check where the thing went nowhere, right? And then after we, put the money in, money started to come in for that startup, right? So I mean, those situations do happen, but I do say that, like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of that investor, and you'll know pretty quick by the look on their face or tone of their voice as to whether you're asking for too much, or you're being unreasonable. So that those are, you've been around humans long enough that you can probably tell that you're losing them.
Yeah.
So it's, if they're a mature investor, they're going to help you shape it, and you want somebody that has experiences. It's not their first one. Like if they're coming from like real estate or something like that, they're going to like.
But is the convertible note path also a way to have a whole group of smaller investors, like 25 or 50,000? Or it doesn't work that way?
Well, I mean, you determine the size of the investor. I'm not sure that's what you're asking. So I mean,
Right.
most have a minimum, right? So let's just say your minimum is $25,000 or $50,000. And the reason for that being is no matter how that money comes in, right? Whether it's pretty rare they would go straight to having equity. A lot of that has to do with protections for the investor, right? They're not technically investor yet. They don't have any equity because they have a safe note as an example. The other side of the coin for you, Julie, is like, how many investors do you want? Period. They're all maintenance. So
It's true.
some are high maintenance, some are you don't hear from at all. So I think the best founders I've known have made it kind of like a unique club where they have like a minimum that they set, and they may let some people in under that if they really like them, and then they do pretty unique stuff where they're sending out updates. They're even doing like little dinners or cocktail hours where they're giving updates on the company. I mean, it's a little difficult with the pandemic, but where they're it feels like they're part of something.
Relationship, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anyone else? Anything
I
else?
think Rose had a question, if you have time. She
Sure.
didn't want to keep
Yeah.
you.
Oh,
Yeah, good.
thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so David, great presentation. I'm actually an investor with SDAC, so I love these sessions and hearing all the information. One of the things I've realized as an investor, having looked at so many pitch decks and like data rooms, is that it really does, it is very helpful for an investor to understand, like, what are the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and projections of the company, like as they face growth, and also what sort of expenses do they think are up and coming, some of the things that you wouldn't think of. So I would, as an investor, I always feel as though founders that have really organized, forecasts or, performers or whatnot are really helpful to give insight. And so a question for you is, having been through this and having faced investors, I mean, have you had those investors that have kind of favored you based on your financials, if you're like more sophisticated in that regard versus not, so that they have more visibility as to what their, what your runway is going to be and how well you're going to fare given how much you do have or how much you have raised? And then the other thing is, I actually invited a founder here tonight who's interested in SDAC and participating, and her name's Sandra Galt, and she actually has a startup about pro formas. So
Oh, wow.
would love to welcome her after you answer, of course, to see if she has any insight also to add.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. On the early stage level, yeah, obviously, I think the most, buttoned up, it's very helpful for founders, especially when you have like a visionary founder, that you have a integrator founder, tactical founder that is deep in those financial guts. When they're doing a deck or presentation, they deem it over to the integrator to kind of give the real gritty detail on the finances. But really, as you know, when you're an investor, the point of the presentation, the deck, is simply to get meetings and coffees and phone calls afterwards. It's pretty rare anyone's gonna write you a check like in the moment. Like, it's not like a game show. So, I mean, people, like, I don't know what the number is, but I think it is, the average check takes, 2 or 3 months to be written from an angel investor, and it's a pretty long period of time. So it's not, that's the other thing in founders I think we mistake in when it comes to cash flow and finances, is just how quickly that money's gonna come in. But yeah, I think the really early stage stuff, I think you can definitely have some forecasts. There's tons of templates. I probably have 30 of them from my time. Some more calculated than others. Some are huge models, things like that. I think it depends on the investor. I think the ones that are really into the details and really want to dive deep and get their elbows dirty, I think they're going to want to dig into that stuff maybe more so than, say, like a visionary personality that maybe is a lot of investors and founders, because they were the visionary, and so they've made their money, and, you know, in numerous, maybe different ways, but they're not as concerned with that. They're probably more concerned on the cultural side or the founder side or the personality match, or how big is the vision, how big is the opportunity. But yeah, I think where that does come into play is later on, right? So whether it be private equity, venture capital, banking in particular. I mean, when it comes to that stuff, you're going to have a full audit. Even especially private equity, whether you have it going in, that next year you're going to have an audit from some CPA firm that's going to go through every detail of the books. So I don't know if I'm answering that for you. Hopefully that's making sense for us. I don't know. Is that helping you? I don't know.
That's great. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate getting to have some of your insights. The one thing I want everybody to walk away from this talk with is best money you take is money you never take at all, right? So if you can do it without taking on debt, if you can do it without taking on investors, that's definitely the best way to go, because you hold on to that control. But most of us aren't in a position where we can grow the companies to their potential without taking on some outside help. So I hope that was part of what you picked up tonight. It's the way Dave built his business, and I think it's really, really smart. And he's used a bunch of different tools and resources to help with that. I think Chris is going to take us to a quick break and breakout rooms. Dave, if you can stay, that's great. But if you've got other responsibilities.
Yeah, I better get, if I want to stay married, I better get going. But thank all of you guys. I really appreciate it. And again, I am an open book and a resource available. So my information is there, but I'm sure Missy can pass it out to you. But if you have any just simple questions, or you need some help with something, I mean, I'm more than happy to. I try to respond as quick as I can. Sometimes I'm traveling, sometimes I'm backed up, but love to help others, love to help them see them come up. So best of luck with whatever you're working on, and thank you guys for listening to me talk for a little while. So.